All right. Welcome to the Building the Perfect Fast Pitch webinar. My name is Ryan Stoll. I'm the marketing coordinator for TriTech Small Business Development Center. This webinar is part of the pre-conference activities for TriTech 6th Annual Funding Forum, Funding the Big Idea, which will be held on April 21st at La Sierra University in Riverside. This is a must-attend funding forum if you're an entrepreneur or business owner looking to move on to the next level. You can find any information you need for Funding the Big Idea at fundingthebigidea.com. Before we get started, I need to mention that TriTech has a live fast pitch presentation on April 9th and 10th. It's a one-on-one with investors for those registered for the funding forum. You'll pitch one-on-one with an angel investor and get their valuable feedback to hone your presentation to perfection. You don't want to miss that opportunity. TriTech?
I can't hear anything. Are we on?
You're on. Yes, you're on.
I can hear nobody. I can't hear Ryan or anybody.
You can't hear anything.
if you guys will just be patient, we'll work out this detail.
You can't hear anything. Try turning your sound on your computer.
I've got it on. It's been working. Okay. Let me try that a minute.
I heard you sneeze a little while ago.
Everybody can hear.
Okay, that's my.
Everybody can hear my conversation with you.
For everybody that's listening, that's Mark Mitchell, the director of TriTech Small Business Development Center.
Okay, I'm good. I'm good.
Okay.
Ryan, go ahead. Whenever. Have you started yet?
Yes, we've started, Don.
Okay.
So this webinar is brought to you by Bank of America. Bank of America offers the best in banking convenience, clarity, and choice through solutions that meet the needs of founders and owners at every stage of your business. So I would like to hand over the reins to Don Kasle here, and he'll introduce himself.
Ryan, thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Sorry for that little technical glitch at the outset. Sometimes the best laid plans, but we're off and running, and here we go. My name is Don Kasle, and I'm a senior consultant with TriTech. Delighted to be so. I've been a part of TriTech now. I'm in my 8th year of doing this, and starting my 8th year here, and enjoying it very, very much. I'm also a longtime member of Tech Coast Angels, having participated in that group for into 10 years now, and have had a great deal of experience in working with Tech Coast Angels, including the privilege of serving a couple of years ago as chairman of the Board of Governors for all of Tech Coast Angels. So I see a lot of presentations and a lot of pitches, both the extended 12 to 15-minute kind where they're pitching to investors to hopefully get a check written, and also that introductory kind that we like to call the fast pitch. And that's what we're going to focus on today, of how to do a 90-second fast pitch. And you need to keep in mind that the purpose of this is to get that next meeting with a prospective investor. So it's rare, if ever, that having a fast pitch conversation with someone, that is where you give them your short pitch, results in an instantaneous comment on the investor's part to say, gee, that sounds wonderful. Who do I make the check payable to? That's just not going to happen. But what will hopefully happen will be that next meeting with a prospective investor. But bear in mind, what I'm going to share with you today does apply both to giving the elevator pitch as well as the longer presentation to a prospective investor. The reason they call it an elevator pitch, if you're not familiar with that term, is that theoretically, if you were in a 10-story building and you got on the first floor and someone said to you, what do you do? And the elevator started going up, you should be able to deliver that and answer that question by the time you get to the 10th floor. Now, if you get lucky, maybe you'll be in a 50-story building and there'll be a lot of stops along the way, and then you can have a longer presentation. But in reality, how do you put together a short, snappy recitation of exactly what it is you're doing and how you're doing it? And that's what we're going to talk about in the next 45 minutes or so. Bear in mind that this is a very difficult challenge. It is much harder to say something in few words and very succinctly than it is to put together something that is much more elongated and extended. In fact, I'm reminded of Mark Twain, the great philosopher of the 19th century, writer of Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer and others. Mark Twain once wrote a letter to a friend of his, and he said, "Dear friend, I hope you will forgive the fact that this is going to be a long letter, but I didn't have time to write you a short one." Now think about that a little bit. It is actually a bigger challenge to get few words that cover the topic than it is to talk on and on and on. So let's look at the elements of the fast pitch. Well, the first thing you want to do is start with a hook. And when you start with that hook, you want to tell the listener what it is you do. You want to get their attention. And this is very much overlooked by entrepreneurs. That may sound like, gee, why would they not tell you what they do? But you'd be amazed the number of times I've heard a full 12 or 15-minute presentation from an entrepreneur to an angel group like Tech Coast Angels. And after that 12 or 15-minute presentation, the first question from the audience is, gee, could you really explain to me what it is you do? And here this poor entrepreneur has gone on for this extended period of time, and they never made clear exactly what it is they did. So you want to make sure it's clear in your introduction of what it is you do, so I will know where we are headed in this conversation. This does get overlooked by the entrepreneur on a number of occasions. So here's an example of stating what it is they do. Here was a company that said, well, what we do is we evaluate and remove contaminated pollutants in subterranean geological levels with the most effective alacrity and highest efficiency. Now there's a real clear and concise statement that tells you exactly what it is they do, right? Wrong. That's a bunch of gobbledygook that I don't have the slightest idea what it means, but this is actually a description of a company that analyzed dirt for contaminants, and then they cleaned it so a builder could proceed with construction once the contaminants were removed from the earth. So they evaluate and remove contaminated pollutants in subterranean geological levels with the highest effective alacrity and highest efficiency. Isn't there perhaps an easier way that we might say that? And the answer is yes. We could say, we analyze and clean dirt faster, more thoroughly, and less costly than anyone. That's what I mean by have a hook that you explain what it is you do clearly, succinctly, and effectively. And that, indeed, is the most important thing in starting out your pitch. You want to state the problem or the pain or the need, but you want to state that from the point of view of your potential customers. You want to make sure that they understand that it is from the customer's perspective, because that's the one that you're solving a need or a problem for, and the way you're going to solve it is meeting that customer need, and in turn, they're going to buy your product or service. Now, when we talk about customers, it's very, very important to be clear on who your customers are and whether or not you have other constituencies. Now, what do I mean by constituencies? Let me give you an example. And by the way, I find giving examples sometimes a very effective manner in which to convey a thought or a concept. There's a company that I've worked with through TriTech that is in the higher education field. And what they are is a communications link, if you will, that puts high schools together with universities for the purpose of allowing those universities to present the university offering, if you will, to prospective students. That is, high school students can, instead of having to go to the campus itself, or instead of going into the school to meet with a counselor from the university, when those universities are out trying to get the high school students to be interested in applying to their school, they sometimes can't get to all the high schools they'd like to. So what they do is utilize this company's communication techniques, and they end up having webinars that are sponsored and put together through the high schools for the students to be able to participate, and the universities can therefore stay on their campuses and effectively get to a lot more students in some of the particularly rural areas that they wouldn't be sending an individual out to do recruiting. Okay, well now who pays the bill for this higher education company? Well, the bill is paid by the universities. That's their paying customer. But who are their constituents? Their constituents are not only the universities, but they're also the high schools where they have to be set up to be able to put this program together. And obviously they are the students, the high school students and their families who want to listen and be part of the webinar. So the point here is that customers for this company are the universities themselves, because they're the ones paying for this service. But the high schools who don't pay and the students and their families who don't pay are still critical to the process to make it work. So it's very important that this particular company understand they have three constituencies, and they have to market to those three, and sometimes you market to your different constituencies in a different manner than you do to some of the other constituencies than you do to your actual paying customers. So it's very, very critical to keep in mind who your customers are, who your constituencies are, because each one of them does have a different role sometimes or requires a different marketing strategy. In your presentation, you're going to want to state your name, your company name, and your title. And let's be careful on the title issue. The reason I say that is because founder is probably the best. If you are the CEO, you can say CEO and founder. But I'm always a little bit dubious when we get a chairman, because that means they've probably got a chairman, they've probably got a president, they've probably got a chief technology officer. You just want to be careful that you don't have too many titles. You obviously want to recognize your founding team, and I understand that that's an important aspect of this, but nonetheless, I think that the simplicity of particularly a startup pre-revenue company, that simplicity is important, and that carries over into the titles that you're utilizing as well. You want to describe how you're going to do it better, or how you're going to do it faster, or less costly. In other words, what is your competitive advantage? And the word disruptive is a very good word. Sometimes disruptive can have a negative connotation. But in the case of an entrepreneur, it's very, very important and an advantage if what you are offering is disruptive to the market, because that means somebody else hasn't done it or isn't doing it in the way that you're going to, which is going to hopefully generate customers and also success for your endeavor. How big is the market? And is your business scalable? How many people have this problem and would be willing to buy your product or service? It's a very, very important question to be able to answer. Now, let me stop here and again emphasize that I realize that there is an awful lot here that I'm covering for you to get into a 90-second pitch. But just one or two words can describe it from the standpoint of answering a lot of these questions. So that even though that seems like a lot, if you take the time to frame it effectively, it is something that can be successfully done in covering many of these points. How do you make money? Now, don't just assume your audience knows this, because while you obviously know it and it's very clear to you, it may not be clear to them. Obviously, if you have a retail product that's sold in a department store, how you make money is probably pretty self-evident. You sell the product. But there's a lot of products and services out there that may be on a subscription basis. They may be on a basis of utilization of some sort. They may have some other factors in terms of the way that money and cash is generated for the product or service. Make sure you make it clear to whomever you're talking to how you do make money. This is a very important issue. Next, let's turn to one of my favorite of all, and that is, have you achieved proof of concept? Proof of concept, simply stated, is an indication of whether or not the market will accept your product or service. I'm reminded of the story of the dog food manufacturer who had a company that manufactured dog food, and they came up with a formula that could have greater protein content, less fat, and would be a better, more healthful dog food that could be manufactured at a third the cost of other dog foods of comparable quality in terms of the protein content. So they had a third, they cost them a third of what the other manufacturers were doing, which obviously meant they could lower the price and still have humongous margins. To go along with this, they got an award-winning company to design a box for them that was in the shape of a dog biscuit that could sit up on the shelf either horizontally or vertically, and was the most clever thing you ever want to see. So they had fabulous packaging, they had a fabulous product, and they successfully achieved having some of the largest grocery stores in the country give them shelf space right next to the Ralston Purina and the Iams and the other dog food manufacturers. So they had perfect placement for distribution. They had a fabulous product in terms of its quality, and they had a very, very creative design that also made for a really effective marketing opportunity. The company went bankrupt in 2 years. Why, when they had all that going for them? Very, very simple. The dogs hated the dog food. They wouldn't eat it. People would try it once, and the dogs wouldn't eat it, and people would throw it out. And the word spread like wildfire, and the rest is history. Well, that's a real illustration of the fact that everything worked for this company other than having a proof of concept. Now, to be honest with you, I use that as an example because I do a lot of lecturing, particularly for universities, on how to present to investors. And I use that as an example, and I actually made that story up. That is not for real. But it gives light to the real important concept that the dogs have to eat the dog food. And that's actually a saying that we use in Tech Coast Angels when we are asking about proof of concept. Will the dogs eat the dog food? What is the best proof of concept you could possibly have? And the answer is 3 words. And those 3 words are repeat paying customers. First of all, they're paying. That shows that they voted with their checkbooks. But secondly, they are repeat customers as well, which means they have voted with their checkbooks more than once. Now, I realize that not all of you are in revenue, or not all of you have the luxury of having repeat paying customers, but just maybe paying customers. That's fine. That's good. Whatever you have to be able to justify and give proof of concept, you need to tell about in your pitch. And I will tell you categorically that this is the #1 reason why companies fail to get funded. So if you were to ask why didn't a company get funded, they didn't have sufficient proof of concept to really be able to explain effectively to the investor that their product or service was going to be successful. Next, we want to cover what is the revenue potential in 5 years based on sales. You can also perhaps mention how much of the market you intend to capture, such as 5% in 3 years or whatever. But I want to warn you, do not use the China syndrome. What is the China syndrome? Well, that's where people say, I'm going to focus on selling into China. There's 1.4 billion people living in China. I'm going to get 5% of the market, that's 700 million. And if I charge them each just $1 for my product, that means I'll generate $700 million in sales. Well, that's kind of a leap of faith that to me is not realistic. So you don't want to use what I call the China syndrome, but you want to come up with a realistic size of market that you feel will generate the revenue potential, and therefore you can say, we're going to scale to a point of making X million dollars in sales in our 5th year. There you've covered it, and that's all you needed to say, but you're giving me some idea of the scalability of the company, which is very, very important to hear. You want to be sure and tell me about the team. We want to know what there is, particularly from the CEO, that gives them, that will give us as the investor the comfort level that this CEO really knows what he or she is doing and can really lead this company successfully. Let me explain it to you a little differently. If you ask angel investors, probably 90 out of 100 or more will tell you that when they make an investment, they really have to like the horse. What is the horse? The horse is the company. The horse is what the company does, the service or product it provides, its revenue stream, the space that it's in, its competitive advantages, all the different features of the company or the horse. The investor has to really like the horse, but the investor has to love the jockey. We've got to be in love with that jockey. We've got to think that jockey is capable of really leading this team and leading this company. And one of the reasons I say that is because whatever the presentation you make, and you tell me that we're going to generate revenue in the 5th year of X million dollars, I will guarantee you that number is not correct. Guaranteed. It'll either be more than that number because of the great success you enjoyed, or it will be less than that number because of other factors that occurred. But either way, it's going to require that you have a management team, and particularly a CEO, who is poised to run it effectively, successfully, who knows how to pivot, because pivoting will be an important part of the mantra of what takes place, who has all of those qualities as a leader that can make the investor feel really good about them. So it's important that we know about the management team and also about the CEO and what unique value, what unique experience in your past can give us comfort about the fact that you are going to be successful in running this company effectively. So we bet on the jockey far more than the horse. Who believes in you is another very important consideration of sharing in your fast pitch. For example, if you have some very impressive customers, if you're currently selling to some names that are absolutely recognizable, or if you have some advisors who have tremendous backgrounds and they have indicated, yes, I'm willing to be an advisor, which suggests that therefore they're willing to have their name linked to your company, or if you have investors who have put money in, or particularly if you have investors that have put money in more than once. Again, that word repeat pops up here. If you have that type of support in customers, advisors, or investors, it's important for you to share that as well. Is the package complete? Is the management team complete and in place? Is the product ready? Do you have paying customers? If the answer is no, that you don't have paying customers, or the product is not market ready, but is still in development, you can just say we're finishing the development of it, and that covers that just fine. What I mean by the management team complete and in place is the fact that it's important to identify if you have gaps in your management. For example, you may not have the salesperson yet because the persons that you've got on the team are more technically oriented and not people that have expertise in the sale of this product or service. And if that is in fact the case, then you need to be in a position to identify the fact that we are going to be filling with additional team members to join us as well. So you don't need to go into a lot of detail, but particularly in the Q&A and in the discussion, it may come out that you don't have people. If they say to you, who do you have in the company that is going to be doing your sales for you that has experience, that's when you say, we are looking for that top person, and this is the kind of person we want. So that's very important to do. Now, the financial aspects of the deal. Mark, can you hear me? Come in if you can. I'm pausing here if you all can hear me because I've gotten a note that the slides aren't advancing, and I am advancing them on my screen, so we may have a problem there. Can somebody come in?
Yeah, Don.
Are the slides advancing? Are you on 12?
The slides are not advancing on our screen now.
Okay, what slide are you on?
The title slide.
Oh my. I wish you would have let me know way back when. I'm advancing them on mine, so I don't know what the problem is. Well, Ryan, are you there?
Yes.
So what do you suggest?
I'm hearing the sound like you're trying to click on it and it's not working, so I suggest you just keep on going with your presentation. Everybody, just as a reminder, if you have questions for Don, go ahead and submit them. We'll get to them at the tail end of the presentation. But Don, I suggest you just keep going. Don't let it interrupt your flow.
Where are you on the screen now?
It's still the title slide. We'll upload the slides later on the TriTech website, so don't worry about that.
All right.
Yeah, he's doing it on his screen and stuff. He wants to.
Okay. Well, I'm truly sorry. I don't know what it is. All right. Well, I apologize to all of you for the problem. The next thing you want to be sure you cover are the financial aspects of the deal. And here it's very important to remember that you're giving an investor pitch, not a sales pitch. There is a distinct difference. And this is a potential big failing that does occur. So it's important that you relate how much money you're seeking, what you need the money for, and if cash has already been invested in the company, and I'm not discussing sweat labor here or sweat equity, but actual cash, then that too needs to be discussed and needs to be shared. If you have put in a significant amount on your own in terms of the investment, then that too is very, very important to share, because it suggests a level of commitment that will be very appealing to your investors. So that is certainly something that that you want to be able to do. We want to hear a little bit about your exit strategy and what it is that you believe will generate an opportunity for you to sell the company. Remember, the investors don't make money until there's a liquidity event. Generally, those liquidity events are either the sale of the company itself to another entity, or in those rare instances, an initial public offering or IPO. Be careful you don't throw out the IPO as a strategy, though, because it happens so infrequently, less than 1% of the time, that it shows a little bit of naivete sometimes for entrepreneurs to say we're going to do an IPO. It's much more realistic to assume there's going to be an acquisition and you want to discuss it in that way. So that's very, very important. So remember, the purpose of the fast pitch is to give your listeners enough information to get them excited and to want them to meet with you to learn more. So what I'm saying is you need to tell them what time it is, but you don't want to tell them how to make a watch. Well, let me conclude by giving you a true story that shows you that this whole thing of doing the fast pitch is indeed a worthy example of something to learn and something to develop. A number of years ago, I was in charge of running the fast pitch program for Tech Coast Angels in Orange County, and we used to do a fast pitch competition and did for a number of years. And we did ours for 90 seconds as well. And we had an individual whose name was Eric, and Eric was a finalist in the Tech Coast Angel Fast Pitch Competition. That is, we had probably about 60 or so companies come in that tried out, and we selected the top 12 to present as a finalist the evening of the final competition. And Eric was one of those. He didn't end up winning, but he did very well and did a nice presentation and had his fast pitch down extremely well and very effectively. And about 2 or 3 weeks later, after the competition was over, he was trying to get an appointment with somebody in New York that he wanted to see. And he couldn't even get this person on the phone to even get the appointment lined up. And finally one day, because he was a very tenacious individual, finally one day, by calling and continuing to call, he did catch the person on the phone, and who had answered the phone himself instead of having his secretary shield him. And Eric said, "I'm going to come to New York in a couple of weeks, and I would like to have a chance to talk to you." And this was a prospective investor. And the individual said to him, "Okay, Eric, I'll tell you what. I'm going to give you 2 minutes on the phone right now to convince me that I should take the time to see you when you come to New York." And Eric said to him, "I can do it in 90 seconds. And with that, Eric launched into his fast pitch. He got a little over 1 minute into the presentation, and the individual in New York interrupted him and said, "Eric, stop right there. Can you be in my office at 2 o'clock next Tuesday?" So it works. And Eric did get the appointment. So that fast pitch ability can sometimes get you to the next meeting. Well, again, I'm sorry there were problems with the slides, but that being the case, we'll go on into any questions that there are now. Ryan?
Yeah. All right. Don, this question is from Ishmael. You're from Snapjet. His question is, how do you know whether you are accurately assessing your potential market or falling into the China syndrome? Is there a litmus test?
Well, the easy answer to that is that it needs to be reasonable. We as investors want to see a market potential that is large enough that it can generate the kind of revenue we want. And what is the size of revenue? It depends on what the product or service is. It just kind of has to pass what we call the smell test. But what you do with the market definitions are build on assumptions, because when you get into due diligence, which the fast pitch doesn't allow for, but when you get into due diligence on a deal, you're going to want to be able to explain what your assumptions were. And if your assumptions were valid, then there's reason to at least accept the assumptions or to accept a proportion of it. What I usually do is plug it in like at 70% and say, well, if they're 70% right, how does it look? So there's different ways of applying it, but there's not a specific formula of determination of the size of the market and whether or not it's realistic or not, but more of an understanding of what the assumptions were. If you're assuming that 90% of all the people that have this need for a product are going to buy your product, that's a real leap of faith that I think is unrealistic. And if you're suggesting 10%, that may be low, but at least it's more believable. And it depends if you're going to 15 or 20 or 25%, what you base that on and how fast you're assuming you're going to scale to that degree of market penetration.
All right. What is the single biggest mistake an entrepreneur makes when trying to do a fast pitch?
Well, there's really two. One is the fact that they would have a tendency to talk too long. If we're talking about a formal fast pitch, that's one thing. But if you're talking about standing in line to get a glass of wine at a big reception, and while you're waiting there because there's 10 people ahead of you, the person right beside you says, "Hi, don't I know you?" And you strike up a conversation and he asks you, "What do you do?" And you know that this person is an investor, a prospective investor, and you would like to be able to give him your pitch. You're probably going to lose him if you talk nonstop for 90 seconds. That's a conversation, not a presentation. And therefore, one big error that they make is that they talk too long with the initial output of what is it you do. But the second thing is, and an equal problem and shortcoming, is that the entrepreneur assumes that everybody he or she talks to knows as much about the topic as they do. And therefore they toss out acronyms and they toss out concepts that only somebody really schooled in the field that that individual is would fully understand. So if you're talking to an expert in the field, it's fine to do all that. But if you're just striking up a conversation with a prospective investor who may be exceptionally successful financially, who may be tremendously bright, but at the same time may be totally ignorant in the field you're talking about. So you've got to be careful that you don't assume that everybody knows as much as you and talks in such a way that you give them glassy eyes. So don't talk too long and keep it simple.
All right, Don, what's your perspective on telling a short story during the 90-second pitch?
Well, you've only got 90 seconds, so it better be pretty short. There's an awful lot that you want to cover, and unless your story is illustrating something that's pretty critical, even if you tell the story for 20 seconds, you've utilized a large portion of the 90-second allotment. So I would be very careful of that. It's probably fraught with more danger than it is value, just to give a blanket answer. If it can be effectively done, then great, but that would be a concern.
All right, William wants to know if everything you've discussed goes into a fast pitch and not a full presentation. And he had an addition to the question that said Bill Waldo talked about a fast pitch being 30 to 60 seconds max. And he's wondering if you guys are talking about different things.
Well, if we're talking about a competition, you can have a competition that goes for any length of time. The one that we're doing with Funding the Big Idea on April 21st, and I hope all of you will attend that. It's a wonderful program. But the funding we're talking about there, or the pitch competition, is 90 seconds. as I stated earlier, when somebody says, what do you do? If you talk nonstop for 90 seconds, you're going to lose them. I mean, that's particularly if it's in a conversational setting. I mean, they're not even going to be able to get a word in edgewise. So I urge you to take it with a grain of salt as far as it. And there's nothing magic about the length of time that you talk. We all know there are those individuals that we could listen to go on for an extended period of time and find them fascinating. And there are those people we talk to that within 15 seconds we wish to heck they'd shut up. So it makes it a little difficult to recommend a set amount of time. And Brother Waldo is absolutely correct. There are short responses that you give to the fast pitch of what do you do, and I subscribe to that. I am not suggesting to anyone that if somebody says, what do you do, that you respond, I will tell you, listen to me for the next 90 seconds, and then you launch. Now, obviously, you wouldn't say that preamble, but still, I'm not suggesting that you launch and go nonstop talking for 90 seconds. But you want to be able to cover a lot of these issues in a very succinct and effective manner.
Should the pitch always be given by a CEO or by the CEO?
That's a great question. And you'll probably get different answers from different investors. That's one of the nice things about talking to more than one investor, because on many, if not most of these things, there's no right or wrong. It's just preference by whoever the listener is. But my advice on that is whenever the CEO can, the CEO should. And the reason for that is, again, we are betting on the jockey. And at the end of the day, the CEO is the senior jockey. Obviously, to have a successful stable, you've got to have trainers, you've got to have managers, you've got to have groomers, you've got to have all of the other factors that exist. But the jockey is the one that we're really looking to, because he or she is the one that's guiding the horse. So we would like to hear from the CEO, and the biggest issue is that the CEO doesn't present, and then the first question that angels will ask is, why didn't the CEO present? Now, I've seen situations where the CEO was in New York presenting to a group there the same day that they presented to Tech Coast Angels in California, and we got the COO to present to us. That was fine. We happened to like the deal, and we invited them to come back and talk to us further in greater detail and bring the CEO with them, and they did, and we ended up investing. So it's not a no way ever, but on the other hand, whenever there's an opportunity for the CEO to present, he or she should be presenting, because, again, we are looking to the jockey.
Are PowerPoint slides usually used in 90-second pitches, or anything in hand, or is it just words, or does that depend on the arena?
It really depends on the arena. In our competition, we don't have 90-second. We don't have slides in the 90 seconds. And as far as any kind of an item that they can hold up, let me just defer this back to my friends at TriTech. Mark and Ryan, what are we doing for funding the big idea in terms of having an aid if somebody wants to hold up a product or something? Some years we've allowed it, and some years we haven't. What are we doing this year?
No slides. No slides.
No, I was asking about an item that they would hold up. So there'd be an example. This is what our prototype looks like.
An item? Do they hold up an item? No holding up items.
Okay, so no visual aids whatsoever. And you can see exactly what we were seeing, exactly what just took place. Each competition is different in that regard. Again, there's no hard and fast rule, but for funding the big idea, it's strictly verbal. Good question. Thank you.
What is the best way to get an investor's business card so you can do a follow-up meeting?
I'd say pick his pocket or her pocket. Just steal their purse. That's all you need to do. You ask for it. You pull yours out and hand it to them, and hopefully that will be a polite way of them sharing it. A lot of times they won't, however. You can say, may I please have one of your cards on there. Now, you need to ask them in some cases, not always, but if it fits, would it be okay if I contacted you further? If not, it never hurts just to have their card and to send them an email. And I really appreciated the opportunity to chat with you briefly and would like to pursue a little bit further. Are you available for me to stop by your office or meet somewhere for coffee in the next week or so? Keep it broad like that. Don't pin them down too terribly much, because what sometimes happens is you'll say, are you available to meet me at 10 o'clock tomorrow? And they'll write you back and say, no, I'm sorry, I'm busy. And that's it. And so you kind of hit a blank wall there. They didn't say, but I'd be glad to meet you at another time. And if they don't offer that, then you're in the awkward position of going back. So just sort of give them a, could we meet for coffee, or can I come to your office in the next week or so, and see what they do as far as coming back to you on it. It's a ticklish situation sometimes, because you want to balance between being aggressive enough to show that you're really intent on getting the job done, but yet you don't want to be pushy and you don't want to bother them. You never know the person that you're contacting, whether they're exceptionally busy because of something going on in their lives, either professional or personal, and therefore they're not available to meet with you, and it's nothing personal to you or to the way you presented yourself. It's simply just a scheduling issue at that point in time. But you certainly want to ask for it, and it doesn't hurt to do so. I think hand them your card, and if they don't hand it to you theirs at the same time, you can ask for it politely. May I have one of your cards? And they'll either say yes or no from that standpoint. But that's the way to go after it. Don't pick their pocket. That was obviously a joke.
So somebody asked a good question that was more for us. If you are going to the April 9th and 10th one-on-one with investors, absolutely bring slides, bring a presentation. That'll be like a 12 to 15-minute thing with an angel investor, so you'll definitely want to have something to show. So for the next question, do we include investment terms in a fast pitch, or will investors dictate the terms?
No, the investors, you're not going to have time in a fast pitch to talk about that. You might say that we're offering a convertible note for this, and then in the follow-up, they may say to you, what is the interest rate on the note? Is there a discount? If so, how much? What is the cap, etc., and may get into some of the issues of a convertible note. But you're not going to have time in the 90-second pitch to go into all that, or to talk about the fact that you're doing common stock, or you're doing preferred stock with preferences, or whatever the details of it are. You won't in that, and I wouldn't take the time to put that into the pitch. Again, you're trying to get that next meeting, and those are things that can come up when you get into the detail. Now, the other part of your question, which was a very good one, is who dictates the terms? Usually the term sheet comes from the investors. The nice thing is you get to accept it or not accept it. You don't have to accept anybody's check. I mean, if the check comes with so many strings attached in such a way that is arduous and not at all acceptable to you, you don't have to accept it, and you shouldn't. But on the other hand, the investor doesn't have to write the check unless the terms are what he or she is seeking. So it's got to be the two of you have to reach a common ground in that regard. But as far as getting it into the pitch itself, I wouldn't go with that.
Do most angels invest as a group?
Most angels actually invest on their own. They are in a group for the standpoint of being able to hear the deals. But for example, Tech Coast Angels, and I know this is true with Pasadena Angels, I know this is true with a number of angel groups that I'm familiar with in Southern California, in fact, throughout the country, invest as individuals. So by that I mean we will hear a deal, and Bill Waldo, who spoke last week, is a fellow Tech Coast Angel member. Bill and I may be sitting in a Tech Coast Angel meeting. He may like the deal and want to write a check, and I may decide I don't wish to write a check for whatever reason, or vice versa. So everybody makes up their own mind in terms of the acceptance or not. And one thing I would point out, and this is hopefully valuable to all of you that are listening, and that is that not only to write a check do I have to like the deal and like the jockey as well as the horse and the space that it's in and the value that it brings and the opportunity that I see and all the other features of things that we've talked about today and others that we haven't. But not only do I have to like all that, I have to like all that better than the other deals that I'm seeing that same day or that same month. Because generally speaking, I don't chase more than one deal at a time. Sometimes I've gone after more than one and studied 2 or 3 and done due diligence on 2 or 3, and in a couple of instances actually invested simultaneously in more than one deal. But that's rare. It's usually a case that I'm focused on one deal and looking at it very thoroughly and studying it and analyzing it and getting going away from it for a couple of days and coming back to look at it with a fresh eye and doing all the due diligence that I want to justify in my own mind before I write my own personal check for it. So I don't do a lot of deals simultaneous, and most angels are similar to me in that regard. So that being the case, it's a little bit of a beauty contest as well. And sometimes I've just seen a case where it's unfortunate bad timing, that a deal that might have gotten traction another week or a month, that particular day didn't get a lot of traction because there was something else that people happened to like a whole lot better. And it was nothing negative on the deal that didn't get funded.
And that looks like that was the last question.
Well, I certainly want to thank everybody, and I want to urge them to participate in funding the big idea on April 21. And as Ryan indicated, there is some special help that we are providing for people that is going to be in Orange County on Friday, and in Riverside in Orange County on Thursday, and in Riverside on Friday. All the details of it are at our website of Funding the Big Idea. But in order to participate in this one-on-one training, you need to be registered for Funding the Big Idea. So go to the website, and that will explain it, and then you can register to get to these special sessions of Fast Pitch on Thursday in Orange County and Friday in Riverside County. And again, I want to apologize for the problem with the slides, that they didn't work for us, and so I'm very regretful that glitch occurred.
All right. So if you haven't been looking at the chat, please go look at the chat for everybody that's still here. I put a link up. We'll have the slides up there in the next 30 minutes or so. So if you want to look at the PowerPoint presentation, you will be able to find it at that location. And we really thank everybody for joining us today for building the perfect fast pitch, and thank you, Don, for imparting your knowledge and wisdom on us. If you haven't done so already, go ahead and go to fundingthebigidea.com. Get some information about the event if you don't already. We're also doing on the 9th and 10th. We're doing the fast pitch competition, or the one-on-one with the angel investors. If you haven't signed up for that and you have a business idea, you want to practice your fast pitch, go ahead and sign up for that. Where is the chat? The chat is in the control panel. Okay, so in the webinar control panel, you should have a little bar that has an arrow on the top. It's a very small orange arrow, and when you click on that, it opens up the full control panel for the webinar, and it has a bunch of drop-down menus. And the chat is in there. You will be able to review the recorded webinar. I will also post a link for that as well at the same place. That would be fundingthebigidea.com/fast-pitch. And that looks like all the questions. So thanks again for coming. Everybody have a great day. Don, thanks again.
You're welcome.